First thing, roll call. So I'm just looking down. I see everyone is here with the exception of Mr. Manning. Mr. Manning recently PCS'd to Virginia. So unfortunately, we've lost him as a school board member. Mr. Kopp has graciously agreed to take his place as the vice president. And so we're looking right now as to whether we can elect, whether and how we hold a special election to replace Mr. Manning. So with that, I'll go back to the members of the board. Have you all had a chance to review the minutes of the last meeting? Any issues with the minutes?
No issues.
No issues.
No issues.
All right, the minutes of the last meeting are approved. With that, let's move straight into the agenda. But before we get started, what I'd ask is I know that what we normally do when we hold the meetings is we will have presenters. What I'd ask you to do is there may be questions or other issues that arise during that time. I think Dr. Washington will be the first presenter, so if we have questions for Dr. Washington, I know she has to leave immediately after, so I'll have a few minutes. I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of Dr. Washington, and then we'll move on, and then I would ask that we hold all comments and questions until the end of the meeting. If there are specific personalities or specific issues that need to be brought up regarding a specific individual, I just ask that you ask, instead of bringing up specific individuals' names, that you just ask for an executive session after, and we will meet after to talk about issues with specific individuals. I know we had that come up in the last meeting, and so just like to lay the ground rules up front for this meeting. So without further ado, Dr. Washington, if you would.
And there will be no questions, so. Good afternoon to the board and to the guests in the audience. The first thing, good afternoon, I would like to ask that you all get the information on the Innovation Zone to see if you have questions pertaining to that before I go into the school improvement activity. And for the audience, what they will be reviewing is our January happenings. We have, for the school, we have a Dime Challenge sponsored by the Beta Club that will happen January the 13th through the 29th. The focus of that is on Feeding America campaign and missions of hope for kids. The other information is that we had 3 students who, well, we had more than 3 students, but several students wrote essays for the Martin Luther King Jr. Program. And the winners, first place was Gabe Zunica, second was Claire Donahue, and the third place was Darius Scott. Then our Future City team went to UK January the 18th on Monday, and one of the teams of Simon Abbott, Cortland Harmon, and Alejandra Perez placed first for the best Future City design, and they were recognized with a plaque. And the judges were all engineers. So that lets us know that we were on track with our STEM education program and what they're doing with the STEM City. Then our 8th grade boys, won the 8th grade basketball championship. The trophy is in the lobby. They wouldn't let me bring it tonight because they want to walk by the room and gaze at it as much as they can. But those students were Chase and Tanner Bellamy, Jonah Butts, Jalen Akins, A.J. Fido, Jalen Joseph, Adam McMillan, and Devin Washington. And our Governor's Cup team will compete at a future date because the competition was canceled for this Saturday. Now, per your request to gather information about the academic program at Scott School, the information that I've shared with you in your handout is focused on our school improvement plan. We have one goal, and that goal was derived from the Terra Nova testing, work samples of students, and then just teachers' discussion about what they were seeing happening in class. So at the beginning of this school year, our staff got together. We analyzed the data from the Terra Nova. We talked about the work samples and how we felt like students were performing. From that information, the data proved that, or indicated that our girls were outperforming our boys across the board, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And then we looked at the third quartile and wanted to know what could we do for not only our gender population of males, but the race and ethnicity across the board. And so the teachers got together with the SIT team, and they wrote a goal for the area where our children, we felt like, were struggling the most. And at that 6th through 8th grade, dealing with mathematical reasoning and logical problem solving for a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old child is a task in itself. So they tackled that goal along with the college and career standards with a math focus. And they wrote the goal that 80% of all students will demonstrate a proficiency in applying problem-solving skills and increase their scores in mathematics. And they wanted it to focus on applying those skills. It's not just enough to be at the lower end of the knowledge part, but they want them to be able to apply what they have learned and demonstrate that across the curriculum. So the teachers have been working, and I only ask the math teachers, those that are strong in their content area, to actually do the teaching of those skills with the children. But I ask the school across the board, as we sit in our PD sessions with math teachers, to take what the math teachers are demonstrating and work with them in a partnership on how to apply skills, problem-solving skills, across the curriculum. And in your handout, you will see grade 6, and I'm sorry we don't have it on PowerPoint, but you would see that they identify key elements of the problem, and then they visualize the problem and draw out the information, and then they work to solve it. So that is our 6th grade, and in your packet you have a 7th grade project, and you have an example of what the 7th grade has done. And then the 8th grade, we wanted to pull another content area for you, so we pulled social studies out so that you could see what it looks like across the content area, and we use the 8th grade for that content piece of information. So basically, we are progressing. We are seeing good evidence of students understanding about problem solving and how to apply the skills that they are taught. And we hope and believe that come Terra Nova time, they will apply those skills directly on the Terra Nova, because we are seeing evidence in our daily work that they do understand the concept. Are there questions about that? Seriously, are there any questions about how we are approaching that? We have 7th and 8th grade for sure. We have what we call a study skills time built into their day. They can approach anything in homework. There should never be a child who says they don't understand, they don't know their homework, or they don't have help, because that study skills time is built in. What we did for 7th and 8th grade, we built that core of students who needed the extra help. We have their study skills set up as a math study skills, which gives them almost an additional 5 to 6 hours a week in dealing with math. We have Ms. Garrison in 8th grade along with Mr. Curley. And 7th grade, we have Ms. Catlett doing, conducting that study skills for the math component. So we have approached this as best as we know how to try to provide students with all of the necessary skills for demonstrating what they are learned. The very last thing I wanted to share with you is that we not only approached information across the content area, but I'm a very big supporter of STEM education. And so we have a school-wide program where the STEMposium is set. And basically what that would involve in is every classroom, every student working on a problem based on the book that they read at the beginning of the school year. And in that particular problem that they have to apply those skills from the mathematical reasoning and come up with a project at the end of the year. So we have built not only individual classes, but now we have school-wide approach to everything. And then, of course, you heard me with SIM Sim City. We have actual engineers coming to the school from Louisville working with our classes, and they're very much a great supporter for our STEM education and the designing of the future city. The last thing, we don't only focus in on math, but as a school, we analyze the regular grades, what children are doing and how they're earning their grades. We know that 88% of our student population, they have a C or above, and 12% may have less than a C. And so once we start analyzing those, Ms. Schmidt, who is here, is the one who, the AP who tracks all of that data for us. So she's able to go into the professional learning communities with the teachers. She puts those scores out there, those grades out there, and teachers, they have that rich dialogue of how can we support children, what can we do next. And so she's doing that probably every 4 weeks to make sure that teachers are very conscious of what's happening with their children and that they're talking among themselves on how to support children. We know that Mastery Learning has been in this district for many, many years. Dr. Calvano brought that to us, and it was a great buy-in. And so we are using all of the tenets of Mastery Learning to make sure that no child is left behind, but no child should come out of Scott Middle School with less than a C. And so in that last slide, it tells you some of the things that we are doing to support all children. Our biggest supporters should be our parents, and we do call them in for conferences to help us identify why a child is making a failing grade. And we do lots of things in committees to help analyze what can we do next to support our children. So Scott is moving right along, and that's the end of my presentation. Do you have questions?
Okay, so let me, if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask a question about at what point, I guess, what do you consider a failing grade? So would a D, for instance, would that necessarily be something that a child's parents would be informed about?
Yes, D or an F, but our parents have been, they're very in tune to what's happening educationally, so they call us or email us for anything. Their child could have an A or B or a C, but failing would be Ds and Fs.
And, okay, so for my own education as well as for the other parents, I think we still have the Grade Speed portal out there. And so parents can go online and see, normally updated, is there a standard for how frequently those grades have to be updated on the Grade Speed portal?
If I remember correctly, we try to have them up by the 3rd day. And what we are also doing at Scott is that we just don't load a grade in, or teachers just don't place a grade in, but they also place the work that has transpired in class. So parents can print anything related to that particular class where a child has a D or an F. And they can print it off, review it with their child, and get it back to the teacher. Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. You mentioned Terra Nova coming up
Yes.
next month. And in looking at the last 3 years' results, in some areas, schools falling below what I think the benchmark for percentile for DODEA is 75%. That's the goal. And I noticed that there's one area that really stands out as being success, and that's science. Between 7th and 8th grade, there seems to be a really big jump. And I know there's a transient population, but it would seem to indicate that the science department is doing something right that first semester in 8th grade.
Yes.
And I just wondered if you had any thoughts and any ideas on how you can build on success, perhaps in other departments, acknowledging that you have a very difficult, and the teachers have a very difficult job because of the nature of students coming from different schools, different backgrounds. But I was just hoping you could speak to that.
And I'm glad you brought that data up. What I did after I looked at that data, and know that the 6th grade was the first year in Scott last year. So building on that, what I have done this year is ask the teachers to actually go in and teach a lesson to their peers. And we have observation among their teachers. And we do that during that Thursday Connection Day. I have them by content area meetings, so the 8th grade teacher could meet with the 7th and the 6th grade science teachers. So there's just trying to get a lot of collaboration and a lot of modeling and a lot of sharing of their lesson plans of what they're doing. So with this being my 2nd year at Scott, they have taken to that very well. Normally, it may take a staff 3 to 4 years to open up to even have someone come and observe them to teach. So, but they are teaching one another, they're modeling those lessons, and they're having rich discussions when they meet in content area or across the grade levels.
Yes, I just had one associated question with Terra Nova. So there seems to be progression year by year in language arts,
Yes.
but reading seems to be flat, and reading is one of those subjects which helps or hurts in every one of the other
Yes.
subjects. So I was just hoping you could speak to kind of your thoughts on that incongruency.
Part of what is the challenge there is that students have come to the understanding that they are reading for information only. And I think it has hurt our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade population because it's not the love for reading anymore. And the more that we can get them to read, the better they can perform across the board. But right now, it's all about reading for information, getting my Cornell notes done, versus let me read a good book and then let me go take a test off of that good book. If they would read for the love of reading through our Reading Counts program and then take the assessment with it, the assessment is where you find that traveling from Bloom's taxonomy. So there's lots of synthesis in those assessments, but right now children are all about reading and getting that homework done and all about getting that information. So we have worked many different programs to try to get them in to read and go back to the love of reading. I hope that answers it for you.
Thank you for your response.
Anything else? Okay.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, Dr. Washington, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
At
Dr.
this time, I'd like to introduce our acting principal at Fort Knox High School, Clark Kirkendall. Most of you know he's our two assistant superintendents, and he's here in the acting capacity, and we don't know how long this will last, but it might very well go to the end of the school year, so we'll see how it all plays out. Kirkendall, the floor is yours.
I appreciate it, members of the board, Dr. Calvano, those in attendance. I want to apologize in advance. I got a bit of a cold, so I may cough and hack from time to time, so forgive me for that. I met with the teachers last Friday during our PD session to talk about the D's and F's. And so I had our ET put together some statistics that you have in the pie chart. And I must say I'm very impressed with the scores. I can't take credit for any of them. That kudos goes to our wonderful teachers at the high school and obviously to our students. So I sort of wanted to put some data with the grade distributions that you have before you to sort of make some sense of it. When we look at the grade distribution for all students, that's 2,523 total grades. So of that, you can see that we had 39% were A's and 28% were B's. Of those A's, that is actually 969 A's. Now, it doesn't mean, obviously, we have students who are on the all-A honor roll, so it's reflective of that, or those that have anywhere, from 1 to 5 A's. And then the B's, there's 704 B's of that 2,523. And you can see our C's, 513. And the category that probably most concerns me is our D and F category. Those D's represent 10%, rather, represents 254 D's and 59 made F's. Again, traditionally, if you see a student that has more than one D, it's sometimes more than 2. So those are the students that I actually want to look at and identify to come up with some interventions and strategies that we can use to improve their achievement and performance. So that's all grades. When we go to our senior class, 39, what stands out to me obviously first is you don't see any category with Fs, right? So that's wonderful. We have that 7% represents 33 Ds. And we have a good representation from our senior class in terms of A's and B's. So we're happy with that. It's, I think, a really good distribution. For our junior class, that 10% Ds represents 43 Ds and 17 Fs, that 3%. But again, it's a pretty good distribution of grades, A, B, and C. For our sophomore class, that 10% Ds represents 62 Ds, and 15 Fs represents that 2% category. And for our freshman class, this is, I think, I speak for all educators, it's pretty typical for our high school students coming out of a middle school where they are thrust into an environment that they have to be well organized, they have to have good study skills. They tend to have some difficulty at times in doing that. So that's a transition socially, emotionally, and physically for a lot of them, and intellectually. So that 10% of Ds represents, there's 80 Ds and 26 Fs. So that's something that we want to work on. I also broke out by content area was the last area that I wanted to look at, and we discussed as a faculty. And you can see there that math, I don't think this is any surprise, it's more abstract than concrete, so from time to time, students at different levels of understanding come to do well in math. So that is our highest rate of Ds and Fs. 18% represents 65 Ds, and there's 20 Fs in that 5%. I thought that what we would see when I asked for the data is that language arts may be next, but I was surprised that actually language had the second highest rate of Ds and Fs. And so 14% obviously is too high. That represents 50 Ds in language arts and 7 Fs. Science, 51 Ds, represents that 15% of students earned a D in science, and 8 Fs represents that 3%. On to social studies, 43 students earned a D, and 12 students earned an F in social studies. I'm not going to do the CTE, and I'm moving on to the world language. I'll certainly take any questions you may have on that later when I finish. But our world language, we had 33 Ds and 12 Fs. And again, that's a curriculum that spirals like math, and it's based on previous knowledge. So, sometimes we're lacking there, but we have some good world language teachers, so we'll work on that. I don't have anything for health. You can see physical education. We see, and in all of our electives. AU, if you have a question about that, represents on the last slide is students who have audited a class. That could pertain to some of our special needs students. It could pertain to our middle school students, who take courses at the high school. So that's what that represents. But again, I was pleased with when I looked at the outcome. We do have some work to do, and that primarily is going to focus on students who have those Ds to see. That's our highest number. So I think a good target is to identify who those students are and create interventions by classroom teacher and by school, maybe adding some tutors that are needed to target them, talk to their parents, try to get them engaged and committed to letting us have those students a little longer during the day to see if we can get them out of that category. And I apologize too, I didn't realize I was responsible for, what's happening. Did you have anything, Jackie? I didn't bring actually the information that you gave, and was I supposed to present that, what's happening at Fort Knox in terms of the activities and whatnot? It's in your packet? Okay, okay.
So, unless there's something specific you want to highlight, let me pull back through it. Do you need a copy? I can hand you a copy if there's something you want to highlight.
I read it, but I just don't have it to go over it. I apologize for that. I thought that was something that someone else was going to present, but I'll make sure I do that next time.
Okay.
Unless you have any questions about anything there.
So, honor roll celebration set for the 27th of January.
Yes, sir.
So, 120 students made the all A honor roll, or all A or AB honor roll.
AB honor roll. Yeah, I was very excited about that, yes. I was principal back in 2000 to 2004 at Fort Knox High School. So, and I helped sort of design the construction of that building. And I know a few people. A few of us has been around for a while, right? Yeah, it's a good staff. It's a good school. I tell you what I've been most impressed with is our students. Well-mannered. I've been there 2 weeks. Usually you'd have a fight, no fights. I mean, they're just really good young men and women to talk to and have conversations with, and they're very pleasant to be around. Any questions about the grade distribution? We can start there if you have any.
Yes, and thank you very much for coming. Thrilled to have you here. And this question is not intended to put you on the spot, but we talked about grade distribution, and that in some ways measures students against their peers in a specific location. So then I guess the natural follow-on question would be about relative to other grade level students across the state and the nation. And going back to the Terra Nova scores, I think the last year that there are multiple grade levels available with data is 2013. And there seemed to be a drop-off between 10th and 11th grade, between 10 to 27%, depending on the subject area. And I was just hoping, from your experience, if you can shed some light as to what may be the root cause of that drop-off, and if there are any strategies in place.
Well, I've always been an advocate, and I was on the task force high school initiative back in 2001, and I was wanting all students to have 4 years of math. I think it's very important that they do that. Once I have the answer to your question, sir, I can retire, because I've seen that same data in math. They drop in the 11th grade. They've done that since I've been a high school principal. I've talked to our math teachers. We've brainstormed to try to figure out. We disaggregated data. We don't have an answer to, I honestly do not have an answer to that, why they tend to dip in that category in math, but in general, I get what you're saying. And we're not taking the Terra Nova this year. It's a norm reference test. It's not instructionally relevant because it's usually data that you get from students who took the test. You don't get it receive it till May. So I personally am glad that we're moving away. And it depends on the norm group. I think the norm group for this last Terra Nova was some states in the Northeast. And so, when you read norm, grades usually dip. When we go to the college and career readiness assessments, expect a dip because it's not something students are used to learning, and they're learning at a different level of understanding. So I wish I did have an answer for you. I honestly don't. It's one I've battled since I've been a high school principal. And we've brainstormed it, and we haven't come up with many solutions. I know we've tried a lot of things over the years to improve that area, but it doesn't seem to change. That's one constant I've seen for years.
Yes, sir, I appreciate that answer. And I think it gets to the concern on part of parents as to whether their children are going to be competitive when they go out into the real world. Are there any other data points available to you to help us understand where the students stand?
PSAT, SAT, ACT are all good indicators of how, that's really how you can compare us with other students outside the gate, because there's not many that we can compare to on the Terra Nova. It's just not something a lot of school systems use. But you can use that with other students right outside the gate. If you've looked at what I call the President's Report Card, DODEA in general usually ranks in the top 5%, and they use DODEA as a state. So we rank in the top 2 or 3% every single year across diversities. We do an exceptional job as a state, and I think we do prepare kids very well for the future. But I'd look at those data points, and hopefully when we adopt college and career readiness, I think they've contracted with someone, DODEA, to develop those formative and summative assessments. I think that will be very important. The assessments that come with college and career, we're starting math next year, language arts, and what they call CEPAs, which are the formative assessments, and that teachers will use. We need to make sure we give them common planning time to ensure they work together and all students receive an exemplary education.